It's not compost tea. It's a anaerobic, stinky, smelly, slimy black stuff.
So I think one question that comes up technically when discussing compost teas, I think a lot of amateur gardeners, and if you just do a general search on the web, a lot of people recommend just getting an aquarium air stone and throwing it in there. Many of us have experimented and gotten crafty and built airlift brewers to get more oxygen in there, at least theoretically, we hope. And, of course, there's the fancy vortex brewers, and we've featured them on the show before, talked to the guys who've engineered that. In your opinion, does it matter how much oxygen is in the mix? Does that have a direct effect on all the life, and does it affect different life differently?
You mostly want to keep oxygen above 6 parts per million oxygen, or 6 micrograms per liter, or above 6 parts per million, basically, depending on which way you want to measure your oxygen. And as long as that's being maintained, you are selecting for the aerobic organisms. Of course, Mother Nature, in her infinite wisdom, loves diversity. And if you're at 6.5 parts per million oxygen, or 7, or 8, or 9, you are going to have a different mix of species of bacteria and fungi, protozoa, growing in that compost tea mix. And so my attitude is, well, let's make sure that we're going through the whole diurnal shift. As temperature increases, oxygen is typically going to decrease. The organisms grow faster at slightly higher temperatures. They use up more oxygen, so you're going to be at a different oxygen concentration. Well, that's okay as long as we're staying above 6.5 parts per million oxygen, because that's going to be in the hottest time of the day, where you're going to be a little bit lower in oxygen, and you're growing those species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa. Now, as it gets cooler on into the evening, the organisms stop growing as rapidly. Oxygen is going to be higher in your compost tea, and so you're growing this slightly different set of microorganisms under those conditions. Middle of the night, it's getting much cooler. 3 a.m., much cooler. So let's use the fact that as you're going to go through these 24-hour tea brews, you are going to be growing massively different sets of microorganisms, and that's just all to the good.
And now you've
because what are the conditions
at least
that...
new questions for me. and to lay them out, time and temperature are two huge questions that everyone considers. I mean, is there an optimal brew temperature? I know that when I've made my teas in my basement, and it gets very, very cold down there, when I look at them under the scope, a lot of times there's stuff in there, but it's not very active, and I assume it's because it's cold and sleepy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so you really want to look at where are you putting your tea? What are the conditions of the plants that you want to be putting your tea onto? And that's what you want to match. So, like when we work with the large hotels in Las Vegas, for example, when we first started working with them, we made certain that they were brewing outside, so that the temperature and moisture is reached as you went from hot, desert hot temperatures in the middle of the day on towards the afternoon, but then through the night it can get quite cool in that part of the world. Well, you want that whole mixture of all of those different species, and then when you apply it to the plant, all of those different species are already there, they're already awake, they're already ready to go. Bang, off and running. But after probably the first 6 months that we worked with the hotels in Las Vegas, they all decided that brewing outside was really unpleasant for the workers. The managers didn't like having to go outside and deal with, so they brought all of their brewers inside. And so now they're brewing at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And they were putting the teas out. If you were running around in your swimming suit and your bikini at 65 degrees, well, you're not going to do it. So we weren't brewing those kinds of organisms anymore. We were brewing the things that were running around in sweaters and, socks up to the knees and, little gloves on their hands. And so when you take those organisms and you put them out in 110-degree temperature, what would you do under those conditions?
Probably
You're
die.
just going to go die. You're either going to die or you're going to go dormant. So all that work that you did to brew these organisms growing at these lower temperatures, they all had to go to sleep. And you had to hope that the organisms that were capable of working at the high temperatures were there in dormant stages, in spores and cysts, and that they would wake up. But it's going to take them at least 24 hours, maybe more like 48 hours to wake up. And so you have this lag, during which time all these critters might be eaten. They might never wake up. There's not enough food left to wake them up by the time you put that out. So you really want to think about brewing at the temperature of the plant that you're going to be applying to. If you're putting the sets of organisms into the soil, you want to be aiming at a little bit lower temperature as compared to you're going to be putting them on the foliage where they're getting that temperature of the leaf. So brew at the temperature you're going to be putting them out. Don't be bringing your teas inside and brewing in air-conditioned frigidness. At the very least, turn your air conditioner up to 75, 80 degrees so that there's some hope that there's match between what you're actually growing in your tea and the habitat to where you are going to be applying that tea.
That's a huge point. I don't think it's a consideration a lot of us indoor gardeners make. I mean, we're growing indoors still, but usually under much warmer conditions than our brewing areas.
Yeah.
Right. So take that brewer and stick it in the greenhouse.
Yep.
Take the brewer and put it out there in your hothouse. Brew at the temperature, in the kinds of conditions that you're going to be applying to.
And now the other point that you came to in both is this concept of time and time for these sort of micro species that we're dealing with. Like a day in our time is a long time to these little guys. So I always think on one hand, wow, wouldn't it be fantastic if I could keep this brew growing and like keep feeding it and keep aerating it and culture this really strong population and keep it always there. And like, is that even possible to do in like a home brewer? Can you culture a species of bacteria perpetually?
It's really hard to do because you're always kind of playing catch up. When you have these organisms growing, they start growing really rapidly and they compete with each other, and eventually one or two species are going to be the winners. The habitat, the conditions are perfect for these one or two species, and they tend to wipe out everything else or force everything else to go dormant. So you're now going to add more foods because you want to wake everything up and keep everything growing, maintain more than just one or two species that are winning under those conditions. But the instant you add any kind of food to that brewer, especially when you've got everything kind of activated and really going, crazy growth going on inside that brewer, you add food and it turns into a food frenzy. It's just like a bunch of sharks. You've seen where you have a whole bunch of sharks gathered around a boat and you throw a bunch of dead fish and stuff into that water, and it's just, oh, look out. If there was a human being down there in that water, there wouldn't be anything left of them. And that's really kind of what goes on in a tea brewer. You have a food frenzy that's going on, and which species are going to win. And you get a food frenzy like that, and it's going to go anaerobic. I have done that with a number of really good brews where we wanted to kind of maintain it, so we put another quarter cup of fish hydrolysate in. And as soon as we put that fish hydrolysate in, the oxygen concentration started up at like 9 parts per million, and within 5 minutes it had dropped down to 6 parts per million, and then another 10 minutes later it's down at 3 parts per million, and it ended up at about 2 parts per million oxygen, anaerobic. Wow. And the smells starting to come out of that brew. We're just like, okay, don't do this. The place to do the maintenance of all these wonderful sets of microorganisms is in your compost. There are long-term food resources in your compost And that's where you do the job of maintaining all of these many, many different species, because you have all these little microsites within your compost. And this little aggregate over here is where you've got the nitrifiers, but over here is where you have a whole bunch of free-living nitrogen fixers, and over here you've got the things that are pulling phosphorus off your sands, your silts, your clays, your rocks, your pebbles, and over here is where this kind of organic matter. So all of that diversity can coexist in your compost. So you make your tea, you're just going to pull those organisms off of that compost material into your water, but the foods are already there, and those organisms start growing, and you've got 24 to 48 hours, kind of depending on temperature, and now you better be using that tea. Holding on to tea for a very long period of time is not really a good idea. You make it, get it out, or you're going to start losing diversity. You get one or two species ultimately that win. So you've got maybe 5 days that you can hold on to a compost tea after it's pretty much finished, but you want to use it in that period of time. Now you can make an extract, and all an extract is to rip the organisms off the surfaces of the compost and into the water, and then you apply them. You're not really waking them up in addition to the activity that they have in the compost. But when you're going onto soil, we don't really need to be waking things up when we're applying to a soil, when we're putting it into the support matrix, the root system, because those microorganisms will move into the appropriate habitat for them, and the foods that the plant is putting out is what's going to wake them up, and it's the plant that will keep them growing and happy and active.
So in that case, you're really just using water to wash compost? Is that the basic technique, and then you just apply that water or that solution?
Yep, and so you're going to use your brewer, because it's going to set up the movement of the water that will rip the organisms off the compost, but you're only going to be doing that extraction step for maybe 15 minutes, half an hour.
And you wouldn't add molasses or fish hydrolysate, you just compost and water?
Yep, you're just going to do the extraction step. You do the extraction step when you're making tea. It's the first step.
Right.
And then you grow them in a tea. But if you don't need to be growing them, and really the only reason we've got to activate all of these organisms so they're growing really, really fast is for two reasons. One reason might be you don't have enough compost to have enough organisms to apply to all your plants. Okay, so we need to multiply them. Or we need to get these organisms woken up so they stick to the leaf surfaces. So really the only time you need to be making a compost tea is if you don't have enough compost, or you have to have the organisms sticking to the foliage. And that's why we got to wake them up and get them growing really fast, so they make all that wonderful gluey, sticky stuff around their bodies, so they will instantaneously stick to the surface of the leaves, bottom side of the leaf as well as top, so they'll stick to the surface of the fruit and protect the fruit against diseases and pests trying to attack your fruit, to your flowers, to your bark. When we deal with things like Dutch elm and all of the different pest species that try to attack trees and dig holes into them and leave eggs in the bark or in the cambium of the tree, we have to have organisms that will instantly stick to those surfaces so that they combat and inhibit the pest and the diseases on the surface of that tree.
And I mean, so many things come up. The first thing that I want to go right to, though, I have so many I want one more compost tea question. This is something of an obscure debate, but brew with a bag or brew open brew? Your philosophy and why?
It's going to really depend on how you're going to be applying that tea or extract. If the particulate material that's going to come through from the compost when you do it open, you just throw your compost in and let it brew away, you are going to have all of that chunky stuff going through your sprayer, and you are going to drive yourself crazy. if you have small opening sizes in your sprayer anywhere along the way, because you will do nothing but have to work to unplug your sprayer, and eventually you'll just destroy your sprayer because of the particulate material. So the bag, the containers, the opening size on the bag, the mesh size or the opening size needs to be smaller in that bag than the smallest opening size in your sprayer. So if your nozzles are 10 micrometer diameter, then you better have a mesh size on your bag that's less than 10 micrometers, or you're just going to drive yourself crazy plugging everything up. And so that's really the relationship between the bag. Why have a bag? Because you don't want to plug your sprayer up.
And so I assume that makes my next question about neat tricks to unclog your sprayer a moot point.
I know, it's all kinds of back pressure and constant washing of surfaces, and it's just not easy to make sure that you've got sprayers that will not become plugged up. Right now we're working with Grow King, for example, to have a sieve, a mesh, in front of the uptake pipe on the sprayer, and you've got to move that. So you've got to be constantly washing the layer of sludge that gets caught on that mesh.
Yeah.
Because if your strainer becomes completely covered with a layer of glop on it, that's where all your microorganisms are going to end up, is in the layer of glop. And they're not going through and being sprayed out. And so you have to constantly move whatever screening material you have. You've got to constantly move it. And so we're working on that particular problem, and I think they've come up with some pretty nice tricks on that one to deal with it.
Well, that's
the
cool.
other possibility is, once you finish your tea brew, go ahead, throw your compost straight into the brew and let it brew up, because you always have better extraction when the compost is just free in the water to go round and round and round in that vortex. But when you take your compost tea out of your sprayer, run it through a shaker screen. And that shaker screen has a little motor on it that constantly shakes the surface of that mesh on the sieve or on your strainer, so you don't get a layer of sludge developing on the surface, and have all your bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes end up sitting in the sludge and not going through into your sprayer.
I always used a tea strainer at the end, and I would have to constantly turn off the valve and scrape off the sludge, and then put the strainer on, turn on the valve, and so.
Yep. So just get a little bit bigger sieve, and and when you're doing it by yourself, you can just stand there and shake the screen.
Right.
When we're doing this at small scale, but it's like we work with some systems where we have to strain 10 million gallons of water in a single day.
Wow.
And how many people do you have to have standing there shaking screens in order to deal with that kind of volume? So we're going to go to mechanical things. The larger scale you're going to do these things, the more dependent on mechanical things that you are. But it's doable. You just have a big enough shaker screen and big enough electrical motor to shake that screen back and forth, and it does a good job of preventing the sludge from developing and preventing all of your organisms from getting stuck in that sludge.
So, the common underground trick for the sprayer, of course, is the concrete sprayer. That's what everybody uses. The Chapin concrete sprayer usually can move really big pieces of stuff through it, but then you get stuff all stuck on your leaves. So I want to go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to deal with horticulturalists where they're going to end up with little pieces of sticks and organic matter and unsightly materials on the surfaces of their plants.
Yeah.
So I think we have to go toward the shaker screen, work out exactly how we're going to get that sludge and prevent that buildup and plugging of the screen. And so stay tuned with the work we're doing with with the Grow King, because I think we probably are going to have a small-scale solution for this.
That's really cool. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Now, I want to talk about compost. I mean, there's so many questions. The biggest thing that I always, when people are like, well, I want to compost, but I don't know if I can get there's all these ratios, and I'm watering it and turning it, and, the first thing I have to ask any compost expert we have on the show, we've had a few, none as prestigious as yourself, or as decorated, I should say. Ultimately, right, like if you just leave the pile and it's well aerated, that being the key point, nature will slowly take its course, right?
Sure. If you don't want to if you don't have to have your compost done in 21 days or 6 weeks, something like that, that's for those sorts of things are for those of us who forget and don't start composting until, I need this compost in 3 weeks. So then you're going to have to pay a lot of attention and a lot of time, and you better know the ratios and have some idea of your starting materials. So for people who don't want to be quite so crazy, what you basically do is you're going to let worms do it for you. Put together a pile of nice green and woody material, and usually you can go to the closest municipal landfill, and they're taking all of the landscaping material that landscapers bring in, and they grind it up, and it's usually about a 50-50 green-woody mix, and you get a nice pile of that, depending on what size you want, and you're going to inoculate that with worms. So if you've got a 4-foot pile, you're going to go out and buy 10 pounds of worms. If you need 100 tons, you're going to go out and you're going to be buying half a ton of worms. Or you're going to give those worms time to utilize all of that organic matter and turn it into good compost. So you're basically going to turn to worm composting, and you're going to do large-scale windrows to do that kind of composting. You do have to feed the worms if you're going to be leaving them in that pile for longer than 2 to 3 months. You're going to have to be adding some food waste, and of course you don't want to leave food waste sitting on the surface of a pile like that, because all of the neighbors' cats and dogs and the crows and the ravens and God only knows what is going to come and visit you. So you bury that food waste at least a good 6 inches to a foot down into the pile. The worms will come up and eat that material, and the worms will happily do your work for you. They will do all of that turning. And in about 6 months to a year, you're going to have some pretty good compost. You may have to make sure that you are maintaining the woody component. So you need to be putting in newspaper or paper or cardboard or woody fungal foods in order to maintain that fungal component. So you don't have to thermal compost. You can do worm composting, and that works pretty well.
Now, when you are worm composting, especially when you're working with municipal waste, is there any concern for pathogens because you're not getting into that thermotemperature? Passage through earthworm's digestive system or
contact with the layer of stuff around the worm is just as effective at destroying the human pathogens, the plant pathogens, the root-feeding nematodes, the scared worms. The only thing that worms don't take care of that a thermal compost will take care of are the weed seeds. And so if there's any seeds going into that worm pile, you may end up with those plants growing, ultimately, when you put that worm compost out. Now, if you take all your worm compost and you extract the organisms, well, the weed seed the seeds of the plants aren't getting through your composting, your tea making process. So then you don't have to worry.
Now, one technique we see a lot on that totally amateur level, but with excellent results, is thermocomposting with, close attention to ratios and things, and then feeding the result of that to a bunch of worms and using those resulting castings as the foundation of a soil recipe. Kind of as superior, the theory at least, is that it's superior feeding thermocompost as starting material to, say, just kitchen scraps.
Mm-hmm. And you're just more assured that all of the material is going to be either dealt with through the thermal process or through passage through the earthworm's digestive system. When you're doing a thermal process first, you're taking care of all the seed problem, and then you're giving it to the worms, and they're just kind of giving it the extra special loving touch of wider diversity. Typically, is what we see with worms. What the worms carry in the rear end of their bodies is an inoculum of these really good sets of organisms, typically. So, yeah, it's kind of a safety factor, and so it's. I always want to encourage people to look at what is actually in their compost at the end of their composting process. It's kind of like making cake or making a recipe of really wonderful food. You always have to have that test at the end to make sure that it actually came out good. So when we're making a recipe of food, we're constantly taking little tastes and little bites to make sure that that combination of conditions in the food is actually turning out all right. So let's do the same thing for our compost and for our compost teas. Get a microscope and get an idea of what bacteria look like, what fungi look like, what protozoa look like, what nematodes look like. And it's pretty easy to get an idea that we want to be seeing lots of bacteria and lots of different sizes and shapes and arrangements of the bacteria. We want to be seeing at least one strand of fungal hyphae in every field, every little circle of light that we're looking at in our sample. We want to be seeing at least one protozoan in every field of view, and somewhere within the drop of our compost tea that we've put on, we want to be seeing a good guy nematode. You don't really have to do more quantifications than that. If you want to get all scientific and everything, go take the introductory microscope class online, and we'll teach you how to do it all quantitative. But most people don't have to do that. You just want to take a quick look at a couple of fields in your drop of compost tea or compost extract and be seeing these organisms. And if you're not seeing them, then it's like, better go back to the compost and make sure that we've actually got these organisms in the compost. Did they actually make it through your thermal composting process? Did these organisms actually start growing, and were they maintained when the worms were doing the work? And if not, then we can have a few discussions on how do you fix this problem.
Now, you're kind of getting into some interesting compost questions that we get a lot of theory on. As far as compost ingredients and sort of intentionally inoculating compost. Obviously you create the right conditions, wild microorganisms are going to get in there. We have a lot of listeners, for example, that are very, very strong proponents of bokashi methods, which I know gets into facultative anaerobes and away from the straight, compost tea aerobes, but still, working in that context of, we have a lot of people who throw their kombucha scobies in their compost and, their yogurt mixing papers and things like that, just to get, a whole wide biodiversity in there. Is there anything inadvisable about that, I guess, is the first question.
Well, if you're actually composting correctly and the conditions in your compost are aerobic, addition of bokashi and the organisms that are growing in there is not really going to do much other than add organic matter into your pile, which, that's a good thing. Those are different foods, and that's going to select for different aerobic organisms. But all the facultative anaerobes are going to go back to sleep. They're not going to last more than, maybe 20 minutes in your compost pile, because all of the aerobic organisms are way more capable of outcompeting any facultative anaerobe for food, as long as the conditions are aerobic.
So now the theory, again, among amateurs, maybe total hype, is that given that, right, in a situation where someone's perhaps overwatered, and so there's not as much oxygen available in the root zone as there normally should be, that at least you'll have some microlife active and working, because those guys will probably wake up and at least start jogging, if not running. Is that anything to that, or is that science fiction?
Well, there's probably a germ of truth to that. What we really want to have happen is for all these wonderful organisms in the soil to build structure so that your root systems will never become waterlogged, that there will always be good infiltration of water and holding water in pores but not overholding. So if we're doing the right job in the soil, we should not have that particular problem. So, maybe when you're first starting out, you've got you bought a farm and there's some pretty impressive compaction layers in your soil. During that time, while that compaction layer is still being resuscitated, it's being rebuilt, and the microorganisms are doing the job of making the different aggregates and airways and passageways and hallways for oxygen and water and roots to go through. During that time, it might not be a bad idea to have a little bit of the facultative anaerobes present. And definitely having the bokashi organisms at that time, or any of these facultative anaerobes, lactobacillus, things that come in your yogurt, they are definitely going to be highly useful during the conversion process. But once you've got things really converted over, it's probably, those kind of facultative anaerobes are just really not going to be performing much function.
Well, this makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the very strong proponents are container gardeners. So they're going one season in a container where maybe necessarily they haven't, especially early on in the process, got it fully inoculated and gotten that structure in place. And so maybe the anaerobes are giving them some stronger benefits then. That could explain a lot of, it's been a burning controversy in the community, let's say.
Right. And so it's always a question of what are we really working with? If you're constantly rototilling, if they're constantly disking or tilling and they're imposing compaction layers, okay, then putting in bokashi and those facultative anaerobes, probably a good idea, because at least those facultative anaerobes are going to be doing their best to help build structure. There are no fungi present, so you can only go step one out of a 12-step program, but at least doing step one is better than not doing any steps at all.
Sure. We could go super in-depth on compost, but I think the basics are pretty well established. Most people tend to just buy their compost, really, if they're working indoors in containers. But I think making your own always has the appeal of culturing these sort of, in theory, indigenous microorganisms, things that naturally, like if you buy compost in a bag that was from the Pacific Northwest and you import it here to Colorado, well, it's got a lot of things that, kind of as you were saying, Doctor, that aren't from here, or
right, and they're not going to
thrive here.
They're not going to thrive. They're not going to live. They're going to be easily outcompeted by all the indigenous, the wild organisms. And so especially if you want something that's going to be operating in the conditions, the temperature, moisture, sand, silt, clay combinations that are present in your soils, you really want the indigenous organisms over something imported from another habitat. Mm-hmm. It's when you go into the greenhouse, when you are going to be in artificial conditions anyway, now buying organisms that come from a place that match the conditions in your greenhouse, okay, that might not be so bad. But definitely if you're doing things outside, grow your own organisms, that's the way to go.
So that creates an interesting, because we have mostly a mix of greenhouse and indoor gardeners. I hope this is a point. I don't know if we've gotten this far without anyone telling you that this is mostly a cannabis talk show. So I
work a lot with the cannabis people all over the world. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah.
It
doesn't annoy me.
That's why we figured it was worth reaching out. But yeah, like most of our listeners are growing indoors or in greenhouses because for the most part, that's what many of the legal markets are allowing. Now, there's some allowance for outdoor, and that's starting to happen more and more. But for the most part, there are these large converted warehouses, I'm sure you're aware, and greenhouses increasingly. So,
yep. And so developing a community of microorganisms that grow really well and are very beneficial for the plants in your particular set of conditions is really probably the direction you want to go.
And now, will that happen in the brewer, theoretically? I mean, that's one of the arguments for compost tea.
Yep. You will, especially if you're brewing at the conditions in your warehouse, where in your greenhouse, hothouse, whatever you're doing. If you're brewing in those conditions, you will be developing that set of microorganisms. Of course, the question always comes up then is, how do you know that you have all of the organisms that need to be present that should be operating in these conditions? And that's where I would say, hey, just go outside and get a handful of outside grown compost. Bring it in, inoculate it into the compost at the beginning of the composting process, and then you will be you'll be selecting from that increased diversity. You'll select those additional species that are going to survive and grow and help your plants even more. So sometimes we see people adding things into their greenhouse situation that's actually detrimental to the biology. So you may always want to be trying to improve and maintain that massive diversity that your plants require by always bringing a little bit of new inoculum into the greenhouse, but you make certain that you're going to select for the things growing in your conditions by putting any outside handfuls into a compost pile at the beginning of the composting process.
So it's not sufficient just to put it in a brewer and culture it in that environment. You really do want to put it through a full composting cycle.
Right. You want all the controls that nature would always impose on things like this by making certain they're not going to make it through that composting process. The bad guys will be outcompeted. The things that should not be there will be outcompeted by the other beneficial organisms that do grow best. They are selected by these sets of conditions.
Now we have some questions in the chat room, and I think we may take a couple callers later on, but one of the chat room questions that caught our eye is alternatives to molasses as far as sugar sources in a compost tea.
Well, mostly what we see is that there's really no point in using molasses or any other additional sugar unless you want to have a very specific reason for doing that. Most of our soils, most of the potting mixes, most of the materials that you're going to buy to grow your plants in already have massive amounts of bacteria in them. And quite often they're pretty good diversity of bacteria. So maybe improving the bacterial diversity, but that's what you do by going out and getting a handful of your outside compost or your outside soil. You're bringing in those species of bacteria you might be missing. So we don't need to be helping them out. If you look at soil after soil after soil, what we've done in conventional agricultural management is wipe out everything except the bacteria. So why do we have to culture more? Why do we need to be putting more of what we already have a massive diversity of in any kind of material that you're looking at? Okay, if you've methyl bromided or you've used methyl sulfate or some really toxic material, it's sterile. It's dirt, definitely. And under that condition, maybe molasses would be useful. But what we're missing most of the time are the fungi, the protozoa, and the beneficial nematodes. So molasses grows bacteria. About 150 different kinds of sugars if you're looking at a black strap, non-sulfured molasses, and you just can't get any other source of sugar that is that diverse in the kinds of sugars. Now, let's get more specific. Let's say you wanted to get Glomus mossi, a particular kind of endomycorrhizal fungus, to germinate and grow. There's where a very specific kind of sugar might be quite useful, because things like Glomus require certain sugars like trehalose or mannose in order to cue them to get them to germinate and start to grow and colonize the root systems of your plant. So if we know that kind of specific information, then maybe a very specific sugar would be useful. But most of the time we don't know that. So that's why we usually encourage people to put humic acid into a mix where they want the mycorrhizal fungi to germinate and start to grow, because in that mass of diversity, which is a humic acid, you're most likely going to get those sugars released. We don't know exactly which ones they are, but the fungi that normally grow in the soil will start to break down the humic acid structure and release those sugars that will cue the mycorrhizal fungi to wake up and start to grow.
And I think that's a key point for a lot of people. The mystery of humic and, of course, fulvic acids is one of those elusive things that people who shop at hydroponic stores don't really ever get clued in on, and what processes they're triggering. Everyone knows that they're the secret expensive bottle, but how critical are they to the chain of microlife?
They are a really good food, especially for fungi, for your bacteria as well, because it's such a massive diversity. As the fungi start to break down that humic acid, that diversity of food resources are released for both the bacterial and fungal communities. Now, humic acid is not expensive if you make it yourself. If you're making compost, you have your own humic acid. Just passively run water through your compost, and that rich dark brown color in that water, once it comes through your compost, that brown color is due to the humic acids that you're extracting from your compost. It's not expensive. So stop buying the really expensive strong acid and strong base extracted humic acids, which it takes your microorganisms something like 3 to 6 months to be able to renature those materials and actually start using them. Instead, extract your own water-soluble humic acids that are instantly usable by your bacteria and fungi, and quit spending so much money.
And now, when you're feeding your bacterial and fungal colonies, because they live, as we said, and metabolize at such an accelerated pace compared to us, how frequently do you have to feed these things? Like, is this every day, daily, you're adding some humic or fulvic acid, or is this once a week?
It depends a lot on how many plants you've got in the system. Like you're doing a flood table and you've got 10 plants. Well, the humic acid that's in your compost that you're, extracting in order to make your teas or your extracts, that's more than enough food to keep all the microorganisms in all of those root systems happy. Let's say you have 1,000 plants. Well, then you're probably going to want to be putting in an application of compost tea with the humics and fulvics in it, extracted from your compost, probably once a week. We get a couple thousand, we get 10,000 plants on a line, and we're going to have to be putting in compost tea every day. And the best way to monitor that is to take the roots from the last plant on your nutrient trough, or the last set of plants on your flood table, or those plants that are kind of in places where they always show the most stress first. Those are the ones that are going to be your good indicators for you. Just clip a really small root from the root system of that plant. Put it on a microscope slide, a little bit of water on top of there, cover slip on top of it if you need to, and look at it through the microscope. And if you can see surrounding that root system all this mass of bacteria and all this fungi, and you got your protozoa in there, you can even maybe see some nematodes, life is wonderful. It's when that biology starts to not be present because they're not getting fed. There's not enough nutrients for the bacteria and fungi to grab with their enzymes, and the plant starts getting stressed. That's where you need to add more. So the humics and fulvics that we're putting into this system, that's the source of all the nutrients to grow your plants. So the humic and fulvic material contains all the nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium, iron, zinc, all the whole 80 sets of micronutrients are being held in the humics and fulvics. So your plant is telling your bacteria and fungi what it needs. The bacteria and fungi make the enzymes to grab those nutrients out of the humic and fulvic acids in suspension. If you don't have enough coming by, if you don't have enough bacteria and fungi surviving, being fed by the plant, then that's time you got to add more.
And in sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're over adding them, some of them will die, right? Like it's not, you can't.
Right,
it's not a
they
problem.
just go to sleep.
Yeah,
they just circulate, and you'll start to see lots of spores. You'll start to see lots of cysts. And so maybe you could back off on the amount that you're feeding, or you start feeding just the humic acid and just the fulvic acids, so that you're only adding the foods. You don't have to keep adding the biology all the time.
Now, some of the kind of more interesting Frankenstein things we've seen in indoor gardens, where people, start to get the crossover of people who just love culturing microorganisms from brewing or whatever. And then you get some cool things. So we had one friend who calls, been a guest of the show, who's done an anaerobic, a lactobacillus deep water culture system. So he did a deep water culture system, and instead of introducing an air stone, he just cultured lacto in it, and the pictures looked good to me. Without going into such crazy ideas, there are a lot of folks in our audience who do like to culture their own lacto, or of course make their own compost and their own bokashi. Are there any other sort of, obviously we're talking about people who want to more than cover their bases and have everything possible at their fingertips. Are there any other bases that should really be covered in terms of things that can be produced on site?
I think it's a pretty good idea if they want to go to this kind of depth of understanding the balance of nutrients, is start looking at nitrifying bacteria and nitrogen fixing bacteria. There are a whole slew of free-living nitrogen fixers, and let's make certain that we get those on the root systems of all of our plants, because then we can really be assured that the plant is going to be feeding those free-living nitrogen fixers anytime the plant starts to get the least stressed for adequate levels of ammonium or nitrate.
Now, a lot of people obviously will do that with their cover crops. Is there a more efficient way? Can you kind of culture them directly, or is that working with Mother Nature the best we're going to get?
There are a number of free-living nitrogen-fixing inocula on the market. So any of the azotobacters, azospirillum,
Sure.
azomonas, and so those you can buy and play around with them, and determine whether they're really necessary to give your plants a little extra nitrogen kick. So that special group, and of course mycorrhizal fungi. Again, they're all of the marijuana, all of the species. Some species, all of them require mycorrhizal colonization in order to deal with stress conditions. And most of the time we are stressing our plants a fair amount when we're putting them into containers, when we're putting them into these restricted conditions that they're not used to it. It's not normal for them to be growing in these really uniform conditions all the time.
Sure.
So mycorrhizal fungi are really important to get onto the growing on those root systems. Of
course. And I mean, I keep coming back to questions in my head that some of them are my personal questions, and I'm like, well, it's not my personal question hour. But then again, Adam's not here, so maybe it is.
Take advantage.
I mean, I've always wondered, is there any, like, the big debate, is there, when someone's making a compost tea, is there nutrient value to the ingredients in that tea being extracted into the compost tea solution? Or Is that because obviously in the compost, right, the nutrient value and the composition of that stuff, it breaks down, it changes, but it ends up in there to some extent. It doesn't go through completely, but when you compost different things, it adds nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whatever to the compost itself. But now, when you're making compost tea, is any of that getting into the compost tea, or is it all kind of bound up in the compost?
Yeah, we might want to follow certain specific nutrients, and that might be easier to comprehend. Or I can just answer that kind of generally.
Specific is always great. I mean, I don't know how often you get an appreciative audience to these answers, but there's at least 50 of them listening right now, and I posted the website wrong, so probably about 1,500 will check it out over the weekend.
Okay. So let's say we're concerned about zinc. Where is your plant going to get zinc from? And most of the time, plants take up zinc in a chelated form. And so that means that zinc ion has to be attached to an amino acid or a protein. That's what we mean by chelated. So we have to have that zinc pulled from the crystalline structure of the sand, the silt, the clay, rocks, pebbles, or from the organic matter in a chelated form. And really, the only way to do that with any success at all is to have microorganisms doing their job. So they are going to be using their enzymes as directed by the plant typically. So the energy for the bacteria and fungi to make those enzymes comes from the food the plant is specifically feeding them. And they're going to make the enzymes, and they're going to pull out of the organic matter or out of the sand, silt, clay, rocks, pebbles, or humic acid. Fulvic acids are good examples of organic matter. They're going to pull that form of zinc from all of those sources. It now gets tied up inside the bacterial and fungal body. The bacteria and fungi have to be eaten then by protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, and released because the nutrient concentration in a bacterium or a fungus is so high, way higher than any of the predators require. Going to release that chelated form of zinc and is immediately available to your plant to take up. It takes no energy for that plant to pull inside of the root system the exact form of zinc that it requires. So the balance of those nutrients that your plant's going to require, whether we're talking zinc or boron or iron or magnesium or manganese, any of those has to be obtained in the same way. And your plant is going to let that biology in the root system know what it's lacking by putting out the exudates, the cakes and cookies, to grow those bacteria and fungi to do the job that the plant requires. So in our liquid systems, we generally don't have a lot of sand, silt, clay, rocks, or pebbles, unless we have, like in a nutrient trough system, we'll often say, get some small gravel and put them in the path of the water flow so that you're causing aeration. So you're entraining oxygen as the water bounces over those little rocks and pebbles. And then what we find is that all of the mycorrhizal fungi and the beneficial fungi are putting their hyphae into those rocks, that little riffle that's produced, because there's oxygen and there's sources of all of these micronutrients, and the bacteria and fungi can pull those nutrients from those places. So not just the humic and fulvic acids going by, being grabbed by the bacteria and fungi with their glues and their hyphae, and now pulling nutrients out of those forms of organic matter. All of these sources are important for your plants to have. What maybe astounds me every once in a while is when people say there are no nutrients in compost. And, I always okay, take a step back, folks, and think about what compost is. Compost is plant material. How could any cell of any plant exist if it didn't have the full complement of all the nutrients to make that cell? It couldn't function. It couldn't be alive. If it didn't have all the right balances of all of the nutrients, it wouldn't exist. So now a dead plant cell, the enzymes from the bacteria and fungi going to that plant material and pulling the nutrients that are present in that plant material, pulling it inside the bacteria and fungi. Bacteria and fungi are eaten by protozoa and nematodes, and now those nutrients are going to become available to your plant. If the plant doesn't take up all of the nutrients, then the bacteria and fungi that are still growing, that didn't get eaten by the predators, they're going to grab those nutrients, pull them back inside their cells. And so we're maintaining a massive storage around each and every root hair of all of these nutrients in the bacteria and fungi, so your plant will never be stressed. As long as we've got the protozoa, the nematodes, in agricultural soil, we should have the microarthropods, we should have the earthworms, the whole community of organisms performing all of these functions. So did that answer that question?
No, you answered it so succinctly that I'm actually going to move on, which is seldom as a guest get me to move on when I want my answer. So, so you do. I've seen, at least looking through your website, you're doing work lecturing on sort of IPM, pest management using microorganisms. This is obviously a huge and significant issue to our listener base. We struggle less nowadays with your old-fashioned spider mites and things like that, and more nowadays with microscopic things like russet mites and broad mites. Those are the big two that you see going around, right? Shay, any others?
Not that I can think of.
You know, everyone can handle thrips and whatever, but it's russets, broad, cyclamen mites, those tiny mites. Now, I have to guess that if they're tiny, that the tiny things that you specialize in maybe can deal with them more effectively than some of the bigger bugs even.
Yep.
What's up, Doc?
And it's just getting that set of microorganisms back onto those leaf surfaces. When you start having these pest species, and it doesn't really matter if it's aphids or thrips or the little teeny tiny spider mites and all of those little creatures that you got to get the old the eye loop, the magnifying glass out to see whether that's what the problem is on here. We would definitely want to go after them with just that big diversity of microorganisms that should be present in your compost. And if you're having a particular problem, it's because some set of microorganisms is lacking in your compost. And that's where go outside and grab a handful of the real world compost that's got all of the indigenous organisms that operate under your conditions. Get that into the compost, get those extracted into your teas, and you're actually then going to apply all of those organisms. As a short-term stopgap, you've got an attack, a quarter of your plants are starting to show symptoms. And, it's going to take 6 weeks for us to go outside and grab this compost and get it in, all these additional organisms into our compost in the greenhouse, and then turn it into extract or tea, by which time all your plants are dead. So, stopgap. You definitely want to go after some of the fungi that you can buy. Bovaria, for example, is an example of that. There are some bacillus species. So, Serenade is basically a bacillus, a mix of 2 or 3 subspecies of Bacillus subtilis. And I would get all of those sorts of things, because which one is going to be most effective at taking out your particular insect pest, your fungal disease. So let's just get the diversity back in so you can stop worrying about it. So we'll inoculate these things into the compost, but you can immediately be putting them into your compost extracts and your compost teas. Things like Bovaria, you put the spores in at the beginning of the brew cycle because it takes a period of time for the spores to germinate and start to grow. And you want the germinated spore to land on the insect pest, because this, within just a few hours, that germinated spore, the hypha, is going to be drilling its way into the insect pest and starting to turn it into a big white fuzz ball. And more of these fungi will be produced because they will sporulate and grow, and now your protective army is present in your greenhouse. You want to be very aware of where those insect pests could have come from, because typically it means somewhere in your greenhouse, somewhere in your warehouse, somewhere in your facility, there's a corner, there's the bottom side of a shelf, there's some place that is the perfect habitat for your insect pest, for your fungal disease to be growing and spreading from that point. And you want to go find it.
In our case, it's so often some cutting you got from a friend who said you just had to have it. And
right.
that's 9 times out of 10.
It's clean and fire.
Yeah, I promise it's clean, bro.
Yeah.
Right, which is why you always put all of them into the room, and you isolate them and make sure for 6 months before you introduce them to your population.
That was a good and cautious answer. 6 months. A lot of people say 6 weeks, and specifically with russet mites, those things will hang out for 6 weeks, no problem. They'll chill. I've seen them chill for over a year in a crop, and then decide one day it was time to just pop out of that apical meristem and start chomping down. And then once they start, they don't really back up. But maybe we can kill them with microbeasties. That would be cool.
Right.
Yep. And they seem smaller, so easier to turn into fuzzballs. So that's, and I love those. There's a product. Oh, what's that stuff? Oh, it's an old forum guy. Everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. The stuff that was the really good foliar spray, and then that lab in Oregon did a test, and I was like, man, they make the roots pack and the foliar pack. OG BioWar.
OG BioWar,
Yeah, that stuff supposedly had that stuff in it that does the white fuzzy. What was that called again, and where can we get that?
It's Bovaria.
Bovaria. And is that available just online? If I Google Bovaria, we can buy that on the internet?
Peaceful Valley Supply Company has carried it. Most or any organic nursery store has some of those materials. And, we buy the smallest size container because it's a massive number of spores. And you only need the tiniest pinch of that material when you're brewing, a 100-gallon, 250-gallon, 500-gallon brewer, because the smallest pinch is still a couple million spores. So you don't need to overdo it. Yes, they will go dormant. If they don't find anything to attack and consume, they will go dormant. But why not keep the spores around, and every time you need them, then you've got that source. Just don't forget where you put the little jar.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we have... Kitty, what time is it, bud? We have just a couple minutes left.
4:34?
4:34. We only have 11 minutes left. I do want to take a couple listener calls. Would that be all right?
Sure.
All right, well, let's open up the line if anyone wants to call in, because I got more questions. I'll ask if none of you guys call in. I know there's not that many of you guys listening at the moment because of my not posting on the website, snafu. The call-in number, of course, 720-310-8237, 720-310-8237. And KTI, you know what to listen for if they do the business. Yup, that's the sound. If they hit that, you merge the calls, and then we got it happening. Well, I don't know if anyone around the table has questions. No? KTI, no questions. JTI,
You
no
attacked
questions.
it with all the questions.
It's been dancing around in my head for a while now.
I see that.
I mean, I played with every sugar in the book. And, of course, I always put fish in there. Fish I always do. I do earthworm castings usually, some source of compost that I use to the castings usually. And then I'll mix it. Because usually I think I do it's like a cup of castings or a cup of compost in my 5-gallon bucket. So then I'll do like probably 2/3 of a cup of castings and then 1/3 of my outdoor compost. And then, I feel like there's a 1/4 cup of some sort of sweetener, which may have been a moot point. Or maybe in, early stage container plants a really good idea. Who knows? But I played with everything from molasses, of course. I tried honey. Honey, though, honey's an antiseptic, so I feel like that maybe kills stuff, right?
It typically is not harming the soil organisms. The antibiotic effect is usually on human gut pathogens.
Oh, okay.
Good to know.
So
Good
it's
to know.
fairly specific for that, not going to typically take out our soil or environmental organisms.
So, well, that's good to know. Is it have any specifically beneficial things? Because it's such a wealth of all sorts of other nutritional assets.
It does select for some growth of some of the better fungi. You just don't want to be putting too much because it does tend to take up water, and because of that osmotic potential that it has, it's going to actually take water away from the microorganisms, and of course then they die of a lack of water. So basically a salt effect when you're putting in lots of sugar. So keep it down to a low level, a low amount.
Huh. There you go. Honey wasn't such a crazy idea. Maple syrup, of course, was an obvious one that I tried. I don't know if that one has any special powers.
I have never noticed any special powers on that one. I'd
That's
go
the highly
honey.
technical term, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's selecting for these species of bacteria instead of those species of bacteria, but I haven't noticed any massively wonderful effect of having those bacteria instead of these.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think at some point it ends up becoming, in cannabis specifically, every gram matters. When you take it to market, more so than tomatoes, for example, or to a greater financial magnitude. But at some point, the plants become like pets, and just like people go to the pet store and they have to get the little toys and the little treats for the dog, people want to get every little treat, little micro beastie they can in that soil.
That's it. You've been a good little planty poo. I will give you some of your maple syrup. One thing we have that is kind of an interesting thing happening in the world of cannabis is selecting for different medicinal qualities. Are you going after the more of the, smoker's delight, senior moment here, the
Sure.
TCH? Or are you going after some of the CBDs? Different kinds of chemicals are enhanced by the growth of different sets of microorganisms around the root system. And so
that's something that we've seen that potentially, one of our friends who does a really diverse sort of exotic, I don't know if you hunt exotics, but this guy's he sources the most exotic microorganisms, but there seems to be a correlation in, as you said, higher THC levels
right.
in the product at the end of the day. But so you're saying that have you seen research that suggests this can be done with multiple cannabinoids across this with different species, or this is
Yeah.
just yes? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
that's
so
the
you
wow
gotta
moment of the
know-
show, guys.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's a up and coming kind of new thing in the world of medicinal plants.
Yeah, that's significant, and we're going to have a medicinal plants guest on, Lisa Ganora, in the near future.
In the near future, we're still
So
I'm still
we'll
sussing it
ask
out with her.
She's got some
Working
tricks
out.
up her sleeve. She's like
Yeah.
you. She's big in the straight world, not in our world. Well, she's not even as well known as you in our world. You got kind of a cult following of
Yeah, for sure.
closet
does,
pot
yeah.
grower stock. I don't know if you know that.
For sure.
Well, I mean, I'm interested in every aspect of plants and how microorganisms can influence, improve, and so it's another one of these pathways where there's just such a need for research to be done. There's all these little anecdotal stories running around out there, but we have to do replicated science in order to really be able to tie this down and say what's really happening and where we can predict the proper response. We know what's going to happen. So lots of research needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just the beginning, but how incredibly promising. And those sorts of things from a commercial aspect, I think everyone's eyes around the table who's worked at a grocery store was like, wow, it's a ton of that stuff. But I mean, from the real value perspective, recreationally, medicinally, however you want to look at it, you grow better herb, more potent in the desired compounds. That's a win for the person. It's a win for the plant. That's what we like.
I'm just stoked that you're doing it. I mean, that's awesome that you're actually getting that deep into it, the research. I mean, keep it up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yep, and it's just this whole community of people, and then having folks who will buy the product, because there's where the money comes back, so we can do more research. So you'll have a better product to sell, to buy.
So one last question from the chat room. I saw it come up a couple times now. Do you use any source of silicic acid, in growing, or recommend a source of silicic acid, or any supplemental source, and do you use any other plant-based supplements? A lot of us use aloe vera juice and coconut water and all these exotic things for pretty good reason, and it has good effects. But again, that's when you're trying to squeeze every gram out of your harvest. Any tricks up your sleeve?
It always depends on the plant that I'm trying to grow and what are the conditions I'm growing it in. What's the end product that I'm trying to make. And so, there's all kinds of little, when we're a little bit cooler in the year, we're trying to grow things in the late fall, then we're going to be putting these sorts of things in to continue to enhance. Now it gets to springtime, and we want things to grow a little bit faster, so we're going to be putting these kinds of growth hormone influencing materials into the system.
So
or we're going to be
do we get to hear what these are, or that stays secret?
That's like a whole table of, because
another episode.
It's a whole another episode, and then we really have to get into understanding the different species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes, and that's where I really want to be working with people one-on-one, probably for a period of time, and because it's still kind of at the bio-wizardry stage. We don't have it all figured out. It doesn't always work.
Well, if nothing else came of this episode, you just gave us an amazing soundbite with how you said bio-wizardry right there. And that's honestly, that's where our heart's at. It's a little bit magic, a little bit science, and that's the nature of the relationship I think a lot of us have with horticulture in general.
And especially when we start working in these systems inside, where you can put a drop or two of this and really see what effect it has on the first 20 plants, but not the next several hundred plants. So what's the concentration that you're putting things in? What exactly is the compound? How pure is the compound? There's another whole joyful area of making sure that you know exactly what it is that you're adding.
And
one person's lemon juice is not the same thing as the next person's lemon juice.
Sure. That's on the microscopic level and that microbiological level, I bet all the more so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this is a whole other just rabbit hole that we got to go down, and now we don't have time for it. So we might have to do this again if you would be amenable to it.
Sure. And I'd probably want to have you give me a week or two to collect all the information and go, oh yeah, there's that work that was done, and oh yeah, this other stuff. And kind of put it together and try to present it to you in a sort of logical fashion where we're seeing actual patterns and predictability.
We didn't want to impose for your first time, but now we will make sure we give you ample prep time.
Okay.
So, Dr. Ingham, if people want to learn more, they can contact you on your website. What's the best way for people to sign up for a course or
because you do online
out some
courses,
of your online stuff? How do people connect?
Yeah.
with you?
So the online courses, if you go to the website called lifeinthesoilclasses.com, you can see all the different classes, and then the farm. We had a person who bought a farm for us in California, and so we're doing a lot of the outside vegetables, row crop kinds of things, food forests and orchards. We have a greenhouse that we just got put up, and that's where we're going to be doing some of these more meticulous hydroponic kind of work going on inside the greenhouse. We've got some aquaponic work going. We're going to be doing some work with shrimp and fish, large scale in Vietnam and probably Sri Lanka as well.
That's
awesome.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Aquaponics always something that as cannabis growers we think about as theoretically awesome. We know it can handle nitrogen, but I've never seen a system tuned enough that from the water was providing the phosphorus and potassium. I've seen people balance it with a foliar feeding, but
right.
That's just
well, and it's all about fulvic and humic acids and making sure. Well, fish or shrimp tend to poop and pee at dawn and at dusk, and so you have this massive concentration of inorganic materials coming through that can just wipe your plants out. So how do you smooth that out over the whole day? And there's the trick. And of course we can do that all with the sets of microorganisms. So that might be a whole nother talk.
Yeah, yes. Definitely. Well, thank you again so much for your time. We've all greatly appreciated it, and I know everyone who's about to listen over the weekend certainly will. We wish you a great week, and thank you so much, Doctor.
Certainly, and thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to doing this again.
That's so cool. That's what we love to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, you take care.
Bye-bye.
You too, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was pretty cool, guys.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool. I'm going to say that was pretty cool because she teaches, like, important college classes and to important people. And here we are. We're doing a little weed podcast in a glass gallery. And she just talked to us like she respected us.
Yeah, that was awesome.
She respected us.
That was the fist bump.
That's cool. All right, shout-outs. We got to do those before we get out of time.
Well, let me just go ahead and do the crossover.
Ba-doop. Phone number gone, right?
Yep, phone number is gone.
Good. Do the crossover.
And
there we go. Not Yahoo Search. Though Yahoo Search animated now. That's cool.
No, we don't need to advertise them. They got enough.
Yeah, they do. True that.
They're doing just fine.
All right, big shout-out to Way to Grow. You could probably buy some of the products the doc was talking about, or you could go buy some Botanicare, 15% off. All their reservoirs, all their trays, 30% off the Hydroton, 30% off the 55-gallon drum of Hydrofarm. The Hydrofarm 55-gallon drum, those big blue joints. The Botanicare 4x4 white tray and the 4x8 white tray. That's the Grow Hydro sale at Way to Grow. Also, don't forget to mention the Adam Dunn Show code. Listen, you go to the Platte Valley store, they got Tootsie Rolls at the counter. But, Shay, have you seen others' candies? Is that a chain-wide decision?
At the Mississippi store, I have. I've actually seen the Baby Men candy bars. So.
Yeah.
Where's that one? The Mississippi store?
Mississippi.
See, Platte Valley, it might just be that's the one I
Springs
keep
has good candy.
I bet.
Yeah, I was hitting that up. They had some Skittles down there.
They used to have like Whoppers and
good
stuff.
IROC's down there too. Go
Go if you mention Adam Dunn Show to IROC, he'll take care of it.
Go see IROC. Seriously. Hi, IROC.
Ask him for an autograph if you do see him.
Take a selfie with them.
Yeah, no kidding.
IROC, a serious contender at Adam Dunn Show Invitational both times. First time, second place. It was such a close second. It was crazy. It came down to preference, not growing quality. Anyway. Enough about that.
Now more about Incredibles.
Incredibles edibles. Like I said, do you want to try edibles? Have an Incredibles. You never tried it before? Maybe you're Dr. Ingham and you don't. I don't think she gets high that much. Maybe I'm wrong. She has gotten high. That's for sure. I don't know that she gets as high as a lot of our audience as often as they do. But Dr. Ingham maybe not going to hit the Fireberry bar. A lot of you guys.
Maybe she can handle that peach.
Go.
You know?
Sure. A little piece of peach.
Perfect.
Yep.
A little piece of peach.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we'll get the doc a piece of peach.
Yeah, maybe we should send her one.
Sure, a 10 milligram. It's a little heavy. You know, you got to be tucked in for the night. Maybe start with half of it.
That's your nightcap.
Sure. But that's what's great about it. You look right at the bar. The numbers are stamped into the bar. You can see it. You know exactly. The Black Cherry CBD, like I said, that's the joint right now.
I'm out on those.
Yeah, as you guys know, I'm getting to the age where like the aches and pains and like my wrist hurts because it's cloudy.
Does it help?
Oh my God, it's crazy. It's so crazy how it like just, it's like a little eraser that takes away those fine lines.
Well, then if you've got pain,
you're in the old tinnitus.
It tastes so good.
Well, it's a double whammy right there.
Double whammy. So check them out at iloveincredibles.com, of course. And of course, you know what? Let's go. Let's talk about the seeds now. Click this. Go.
Seeds
boom.
here.
Here's.
Seeds
No.
here
This one.
This
one. This
yeah,
is the correct one. Yes.
Right
this one.
This.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dark horse.
These all have names now, and I can't say this in any official Dark Horse stuff, but I can say no. They're real names. Like one of those is Amadeus Cho, and one of those is Joe Fixit.
Okay.
One of those is Hulk 2099, and one of those is Tyrone Cash. And these are all...
Did you help name them?
Well, so here's the thing. So Marvel owns a trademark on many of the Incredible Hulk-related characters. And to be clear, Marvel doesn't own the word Hulk. They own the word Incredible Hulk.
Oh.
So...
So there's ways around it.
Yeah, well, so, like, Tyrone Cash, you never heard of him, right? No, because he's, like, a very minor character. He's important to Bruce Banner.
Okay.
In
correlation
thing.
to it,
Yeah, but he's a very, very minor character in the whole, liturgy or whatever. Like, he's not in a lot of comic books. Amadeus Cho is the Asian American Hulk, by the way, but only short-lived. Like, not everyone even knew that existed. So, point being, these guys aren't necessarily as well secured intellectual property by Disney and the like. So,
I think that makes it cooler, though.
yeah, no, it's cool. It's like you wouldn't even know.
Now everyone needs to go and research those names.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
So
you gotta do your work.
Now it's a double mystery. First, you got to track
gotta
down
be
the
the
Dark
know.
Horse packs.
Now we interested you, and now you got to go deeper.
Dig it up. Dig it up.
Learn something.
Learn something.
Get working.
There you go.
Knowledge is power. Now grow those seeds.
Yes. It's all the same. Pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
All right, KTI. What? You have the timer? Are you effing kidding me?
No, I don't. This is a screenshot. This is a screenshot.
Are you? Oh.
It's a screenshot from a long time ago to remind me of what to do and when to do it.
Dude, I thought the timer was gone. I love the timer.
Yeah, it is.
KTI, you're getting on your point.
You know.
So impressed.
But not the actual timer. It's just a
screenshot.
Yeah.
You see how much I love the
It's
timer.
from
That was
back in the day.
obvious how much I love the timer there.
Yeah.
Look, it says my battery's almost dead. It's not me anymore. I have a full battery. That's a fake screenshot.
That's how we used to keep the show in order.
You just punked Mitch right there.
Yeah. Okay. Big shout out to Build the Soil. Build the Soil, who's held us down since we used the timer. Build the Soil was around when we did 3-hour shows, and he used to fill those.
Wow.
Yup.
Yeah.
So I hope Jeremy was listening today. I can't wait to get his feedback. I might have him.
Yeah.
Next week we're cooking up a special one.
Combination.
That's a weird combination to
It
me.
would, but
So right now,
Not
I'm
next
pretty
week.
sure, like I said, he's doing a sale on the Build the Soil. I don't know if it's the classic. I don't know if it's the custom.
And if it isn't, it's still good.
Well, everything.
Oh, you know what it is? No. I remember. No, he's got the. He stopped that one. He switched over to the flower.
The Build the Flower top dress.
Ooh,
Yes.
Okay.
Final
Build the
answer.
Flower
I
top.
remember.
Jeremy, do you see how effective your
KTI.
emailings are, bro? I fucking had to click it. I don't click email.
Where is it?
Thank
Find
God
it.
for KTI, dude.
No, it's the
We're
Build the
there.
Flower top dress. It absolutely is.
Maybe this one. Build Soil Craft.
No, that's the one that was on sale
Okay.
Yeah.
last time. Now it's
Well,
the Build.
now it gives you a reason to call too. So
Yeah, you can call him.
Exactly.
Jeremy's really,
I like
really
that
nice. He's
thinking.
actually
or if not,
nicer
we
than
can
any
post
of
it on
us.
Facebook or somewhere.
But
Yeah. Paga.
yeah, if
We'll
sign up,
keep
you
it
want to know
on.
what?
Oh, here
Sign
we
up.
go.
Sign up.
He's got a search
Sign
button.
it.
Okay. See, that's how convenient it is. Or just sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll get the emails too.
That
and
sounds great.
You'll be able to look at exactly what
You'll
we're
be on
talking
top of
about
every sale.
before we announce it by a day. Maybe it's not even here. Oh, is that it? Build
This
a flower.
is the Build a Flower top dress.
There it is. That's what it is this month.
Yeah. So get on it with some vermicompost, some pinto bean compost, some more compost, and Ollie Mountain compost, and biochar. Ooh, that stuff's good. Comfrey. Comfrey's so
He's got
good.
that
Kelp
comfrey
meal.
leaf he grows himself. That's awesome.
Yep.
Neem cake and fishbone meal and gypsum.
Yep.
It's awesome. It's a really good setup.
Yep.
Do it.
It's good stuff.
Cool.
This is
So
Jeremy.
the transition at
Soil.
this point in time.
BuildTheSoil.com.
BuildTheSoil.com.
And of course, do your thing, Shay.
Grow stones, and you can add those grow stones into your soil.
Did you
know, I caught
were
that.
we were
Oh,
having
yeah.
a moment there,
We
right?
were,
Talk
we
about
were.
that.
Well, just because of grow stones, I mean, they were made for what she was speaking about, having the water go through it, catching all that. So, I mean, what better products to go into correlation with that than grow stones? So, we can always talk more in depth about that. But also, going back to Way to Grow, that hydro sale, go talk to Tyson, go talk to anybody at your store, iRock. Get the hook on grow stones, because if you're gonna start a hydro setup, get some stones in there. They're gonna be amazing. I'm not dogging on Hydroton, but it's a great product to use instead of hydrogen. You're not mining, so it's all 100% glass bottles recycled. So
and if you want to run compost tea in your hydro setup, which is mostly what she was talking about there,
she was.
I bet it'd be a lot better with Growstone than hydrogen. I can't
hydrogen,
say for sure, but from what I know about these things,
we have 30% more aeration than hydrogen.
There you go.
So right
those
there,
things love oxygen.
Yep.
And cation exchange.
The cation exchange is amazing.
So that's what's important, to hold those little things that the little things want to eat. So I'm going to say Growstones are probably better.
Yep.
So Growstone.
Chala.
Growstone.com.
Do it. Get Growstones.
Get lifted.
And come on, KTI.
Working on it. Computers aren't my, I didn't major in computer science, unfortunately. It's not my degree.
We do, because you know what? People who major in computer science don't volunteer for weed shows.
Yep. I did political.
True fact. Political science, social science, Computer science, no. You have a real world job skill.
Yeah, I leave that up to these people. Hydroponic.
Sure. Hydroponic research. They know real world science.
Yes, they do.
Veg and Bloom. I can't even, like I said, ask other people. Don't just ask me. Large scale gardens, use Veg and Bloom, have consistent results.
Yeah.
That's it. If you use the whole lineup, you're guaranteed exceptional results.
I say give it a shot. I mean, the price is really good for what you're getting.
Well, that's the bad.
Yeah.
I never even talk about that part, but
But I mean, that's not dogging it. I'm just saying.
Not at all.
You got go out and try the whole line. Give it a shot.
Yeah, and keep it cheap with it powdered. Powdered and simple.
You're not paying for water is one of the key things. In every bottled nutrient, 99% of it is water. They dissolve some salt in water, and you're paying for all that water because you're paying for the whole bottle of it. You're not getting a whole bottle of the active ingredient and diluting it in water that you're already getting cheap out of your tap.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. And they're mixing it to the water that's coming out of your tap.
Absolutely.
So it's safe to do that. You can, even if you wanted to do that from someone else, and it wouldn't necessarily work out for you because it depends on what kind of water you're starting with. So in this case, they adjust for that. So you can find out more about them at hydroponic-research.com, or again, just Google Veg plus Bloom, and that'll bring you right here too. That's the name of it. And if you haven't tried it, I don't know if they're still sending samples, but they're pretty nice. They'll probably, if you ask really nicely, and maybe offer to show them pictures, sweeten it up a little bit. You probably get some samples out of it.
There you go.
Show.
Yeah,
always
mention the
drop
show.
that done.
Yeah,
Hashtag
check it out. You
KTI.
can probably get some samples. see what's happening. They might thrill them. It might excite them. Is that true with Growstones too, Shay? While you're sitting here?
Oh yeah.
That's true with
Well,
Growstones?
just blow me up. I mean, we'll see what we can do.
Email Shay at growstone.com and ask her for all the free stuff. Look at the
We
hat she has. That's a Growstone hat.
And
It's
rocking,
these guys have all kinds
Brothers
of gear.
Grimm right now, so shout out to Soul and
Tom.
Duke
Duke.
Diamond.
Yeah.
You can call him Tommy. It's okay. He
I don't
called
know,
himself Tommy.
sometimes.
on the show.
It's out of respect. I love that guy, so good friend of mine.
Tommy's the man. He prank called the show last week.
I told
Yeah,
him to
that's
because
awesome.
I told him Bodie was on.
Oh.
And I
there you
texted him.
go.
I was like, "Oh, your boy's in town and he's on the show." And he's like, "That's it. I'm calling in."
Which I saw a bunch of Mountain Dew laying around, so that's to sprout our seeds.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what you
Keep it
sprout
going.
seeds in. Yep. That's the best thing to sprout seeds in.
He's got some great stuff coming out. They do, both of them.
And speaking of seeds,
Speaking of
hey,
seeds.
speaking of even Brothers Grimm, hey,
Yeah,
that's where you
check-
can get your Brothers
That's where you
Grimm.
can get your
There you
Brothers
go.
Grimm at. Seeds here now.
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 Seedsherenow.com. I'll read the specials again. Let me open. Oh, my phone died.
Do it. Oh, man. Well,
See, this is why you got to sign up. Sign up for the email. Hold on. Show them how to sign up.
all right. So we're going to go to the home,
Home.
and then you just scroll on down.
Scroll that to the bottom. To the bottom. And then you. Is it gone?
Oh,
there
there we
it
go.
is.
It's just up at the bottom. It's right next to their phone number.
Call the phone number if you want to sign up for the text club. You just want to know how to get any good seeds, or if you're looking for something specific. If you have a certain season length you're working with because you're outdoors. If you're indoors and you got low ceilings. If you have certain specific needs, call them. They know their product really well. That's another one like Jeremy.
Yeah.
Call them and mention the show when you call them. They'll give you
For
extra
sure.
time and attention. I pretty much guarantee that. And if they don't, tell us and
Yeah.
we'll tell them. How about that?
Yeah, we'll handle it.
But I think they will
Yeah.
take care of you. so well
they're
that
awesome.
we will only hear rave things in both directions. Right now, Snow High Seeds is on sale. We're going to try to get Snow High on the show, see some interesting things. But you can go get the bean, get the gear right now, grow it out, talk to the man about it when he's on. That was kind of the coolest part about the Bodie show.
Yeah.
So it was cool. I missed the Bodie show, but I was feeding a bunch of the questions. I asked a bunch of those questions to Bodie the night before, so we kind of had talked about it a little. That was a really cool dinner at the like vegan Buddhist restaurant with Bodie.
That's awesome.
Was a really
I'm
cool
jelly.
dinner. Bodie told me he doesn't eat creatures, by the way.
That's cool. That's respectful.
Also, fun fact: Bodie's never taken a dab.
Really?
Never taken a dab.
He's dab free, huh?
Dab, undabbed. Not surprising though, right? Like
No,
totally.
not really.
He's
No.
yeah. No,
You know,
and that's
to
the
each
thing
their
about
own.
Bodie.
To each
Dude,
their
the
own.
dude can have untrimmed weed with seed in it, not take a dab, and everyone thinks he's the man walking around there.
Oh, he's still the man.
Everyone
regardless,
else
yeah.
is like trimming their weed up. Oh my God, my crop got seeded. Oh, dabs. Guys, there is another way.
Yeah.
Just look at Bodie. Just look at Bodie. So awesome to have him on the show, and so
Yeah.
awesome to
Shout
actually
out to
hang
you,
with
Bodie.
him.
Awesome.
And hopefully we'll get him back. I'll get him on the show with all you guys. And again, thanks today to Dr. Ingham. That was really fucking cool.
Yeah, that was an awesome episode.
Now I'm
Lot
going to
of
get
information.
KTI. You officially, she said she'd do it again. So officially, we're going to
Well,
stay in touch with her. But
But we'll
also,
give her time too. Yep.
PhDs
Plenty.
are open.
Oh, yeah.
The PhDs is an open source. Hit
Yeah.
up Chomsky.
KTI
Get me
and
Chomsky.
No,
KTI.
oh my
Yes,
goodness,
get me
we're really.
more Chomsky,
That's
yes.
good. I'm glad we got some high. Yeah, no, I'll try.
We'll go
You know
highbrow.
what I mean?
will go
I'm
fucking
down.
highbrow to the roof.
I'm cool with that.
He can do it.
I like that. We got it.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Look, she's a PhD. Well, now, when you
No,
in
she's-
the form letter, when you email people, we featured people such as Dr.
Well, yeah,
Doug,
no,
Dr.
she's-
Doug. Now,
yeah.
two PhDs.
Yeah.
Paula Costa.
Yeah, we played Dr. Frost on here too. Frost
And-
from BioWag.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not really a doctor,
He's not?
I don't think. No.
No.
Nope. No.
Well, they don't know that.
No, but now we have Dr. Ingham. She's like a big name. You Google
Yeah, she
her and her
is.
face pops
Yeah.
up, just like Noam Chomsky.
Oh
That's
my
all I'm
God,
saying.
yeah.
Is he even
No.
a doctor?
No? Yeah, he is.
He is, right?
Yeah, he
he
is.
doesn't.
Yeah,
he's just,
yeah,
he's
got a
just too
PhD.
down to earth to rock the
Oh
doc.
yeah, he's
He's
a,
like, no. I'm
No,
not.
yeah,
no,
well-
just call me
I
Noam.
can't have that title.
Yeah, no, he got it. I think it's MIT or something out there. Well, that's-
Probably. All right.
Anyway,
Well,
Future now.
personal shout-outs? KTI?
shout out to you
To you too, buddy. Shay TI?
Shay TI.
and GTI. Bam.
Shay TI, shout-outs?
I did my shout outs. Grow Stones, all my friends out there in the world,
Right.
growing, doing things. Keep it up. Much love. One love.
Except for two.
Shout out to Adam, of course,
yeah,
at Arise.
Adam, we miss you. Have fun at
And
Arise.
CC and Nick, they're
Go
going to have
up
a
there and
blast.
say hi to them.
Go visit them. The
Yeah.
kids up there, too. So
Nick's
you can
up
see
there
half
running
of the Adam Dunn
around.
show up
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Go bug 'em.
Of course, much love to my amazing wife, Reese, and little baby Farron, who got potty trained apparently most of the way in one day today.
That is awesome.
Like, what? This kid is fucking amazing. Remarkable to see her comprehend what she's supposed to do and just, like, be on top of it. That sound means that, well, it sounds like it means the end of the show, but it really means you close Skype. But I'm going to pretend that it means it's time for us to end the show because the spaceship is going to power down. KTI also looks like...
Yeah, it looks like we're frozen
we're
anyway.
frozen.
Oh yeah, so I think we're just like broadcasting to us right now.
Anyway,
But who knows?
if you guys don't come back next week, we love you. Anyway, but hopefully you
Come
will
back.
because we
Come
got a
back.
big one.
Lots of love.
No one's going to hear it. Then no one's here. No one, you don't have to do it.
Well, we're just gonna pretend that people are gonna hear
Maybe
this.
they can. Maybe they
Maybe
can.
the
for all
fingers
we know.
crossed it. That's what I'm watching.
To the children, to take a trip, to cop out, to groove. The psychedelic check.
Is that first one,